This next session is something I've been looking forward to for weeks. It's a conversation with two of my amazing trainers and coaches who represent people builders in South Asia. Now, having said that, both these ladies have so much experience and expertise and profile on their own. They just happen to be a part of our team. Let me just introduce you to them one at a time, and then I'll bring them in. So Rushdina Khan is an award-winning emotional intelligence trainer and coach from Bangladesh. She works on reinforcing and refurbishing the knowledge, skills, competencies, and habits of people in the workplace, which helps organizations to succeed in their professional endeavors. She has a master's in human resource management and development from Middlesex University. We've also got Dr. Sandhya Rani C. She's an international trainer, assessment expert, and executive coach. She trains managers in social and emotional intelligence, leadership development, and stress management in organizations across several industries and non-profit institutions. She holds an MBA in human resources management and a PhD in emotional intelligence. As I said, both these ladies are well established in their own practices, and I'm humbled that they're a part of our global team. They are both graduates of our social and emotional intelligence certification program. Please help me welcome them to the stage as we discuss together how we can reduce stress through emotional intelligence. So welcome, Sandhya, welcome, Rushdina. Come on in. All right, so welcome. We're going to have a great conversation. We've got some questions here that we have prepared. And then what I'm going to do is, as I told both of you, I want this to be more about you than me. All right, so I want you to forget, that we work together and that I've trained you and all that sort of stuff, because you've got plenty of answers here and people have already heard enough from me, okay? All right, so we've got some questions here. Stress is a big thing. I stand here as someone who has a long-standing history, both in my military and corporate career, about stress, to the point where it pretty well wrecked my life. I've had 4 physical and 1 mental breakdown over my, 58 years, and emotional intelligence was certainly a savior for me. So I want to pull out of the 3 of us tonight some of these answers, because I'm going to be looking and doing my best to stay in the chat as well, because that's what we do. We can do more than one thing at a time, but I'd love to, as we're going through this, I'd love you to be throwing things in there, throw questions in, throw comments in, because I will come back with it. So here's the first one that I want to ask both of you. All right, and I've just got you on my screen here with Rushdina being up the top and then Sandhya down the bottom. I'm not sure how that works. I can't move you around. I'm not that technically minded. But I want, so we'll go with you first, Rushdina, and then Sandhya. Why are you so passionate about the work that you do in emotional intelligence?
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's such a wonderful question to start with, Grant. I love it because it is through EI we can regulate and manage all aspects of human behavior, and at the same time manage our relationships for the growth of ourselves and others. It helps us with strength, confidence, continuous self-development, creates a mechanism, an auto mechanism of self-motivation, develops resilience, and most of all, EI empowers us to make our own choices of response, not to become a victim of the situation.
Love that. Excellent. Thank you. And Sandhya, what about you?
Yeah, I loved Rushdina's answer. It was such a wholesome answer. I have very little to add to that. When I look at emotional intelligence, I see how people can use very simple techniques and tools from emotional intelligence and bring in a lot more healthier and happier aspects to their life, which means a lot of wellness from a physical, mental, emotional perspective, which is especially good these days. So I like how emotional intelligence can improve the quality of life, whether it is family or work or parenting or social life as such. So emotional intelligence is the best when it comes to helping us live a better life.
Wow, I love that. And you loved it that much. You did your PhD dissertation on emotional intelligence.
That's right.
Fantastic. Love that. All right. So we want to keep this at a level where we're not talking about, hormones and chemicals and parasympathetic nervous systems and all that sort of stuff, right? We want to keep it at a practical level. All right. So from a human behavior perspective, what do you think the main causes are of stress? So what I mean there is, we know there's different types of stress and all that sort of stuff. There's eustress, which is good stress. We're not going to go there. Just from a perspective of what we think, what we do as humans and the behavioural work that we do, what do you think causes undue stress?
So
where does it
shall
start?
I start?
Yeah,
May I?
please.
Okay. I see it this way: when you do not get what you're expecting, so getting, for an example, getting very little in return of what you put in, you expect a good salary for the amount of work that you're doing, and you're not getting it. Or when things do not work as planned, you plan to do one work today while you're added to this 10 work schedule today, and you were not prepared for it. You're missing out deadlines. You're getting stuck in this unpredictable traffic. So when it's something else you're expecting and not getting at it, so all this happening repeatedly causes stress. So that's my perspective of looking at it.
Fantastic. So is what you're saying there, yes, those things are happening, but is what you're saying there, the way that we're looking at it that's creating the stress?
Yes, I would say the way that we're looking at it, because if I am to explain a little further, first of all, if I expect a traffic on my way to work today that would take me around 2 hours to reach my workplace, so that's much easier for me to accept it when I spend around 1.5 hours on the way. But if I'm expecting to reach the workplace within 20 minutes and it takes around 2 hours, so that's when I start getting stressed. So it's not what you're expecting, not what you want to happen. So that's when the stress strikes.
So unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Right.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, for those who don't know, Rushdina is from Dhaka in Bangladesh, and I've been there 2 years ago, and it's the most densely populated city on the planet. And yeah, I understand she hasn't got to go too far to go to work, but it still takes 2 hours to get there in a car. And for someone who reacts badly as a driver in traffic, so it's one of my triggers, I wouldn't do it. So for me, my commute to work right now is about 14 seconds from my kitchen to my studio. So I've got no excuse for any stress. So yeah, so it's not just what happens, it's how we look at it and the expectations. I love that. So what would you add to that, Sandhya?
Yeah, so what I see from my experience recently, people are very stressed because of the lack of compartmentalization in their lives, because we've brought home the work, and so work happens from home, and we have the family life also happening at home, and children are taking their schooling from home. And so earlier, when people had everything perfectly compartmentalized, I would say that however little your commute was or large your commute was, people were able to disengage from family life during that commute and get prepared for the work in the office. But now there is no such space for transition, and everything has come home. And so you have a spouse working from home, you are working from home, your child is studying from home, and added to all of that, at least in the Asian countries, we had a lot of help at home, which is stopped right now due to lockdown. So this is causing a lot of stress to people because there is no compartmentalization literally in their lives. Along with that, there is a lot more of usage for social media these days because we would like to keep in touch with people and have a real good social life. And what I see in my work with teenagers and young adults is that social media is causing a lot of stress, adding to all these other problems due to lack of compartmentalization or socialization.
Yeah, I love that. And I work from home. I have been doing for many, many years, except when I was traveling. Obviously, I wasn't at home. So I can totally understand that. I remember one thing that really helped me that I do that might just help, it just came to me as you were saying it, is to make sure that you've got a place set up, if you can, that is for work. And one of the things I used to do is I put a different lock on my office door to what was on the rest of the house. So when I was finished at the end of the day, what I would do is lock my office, and I would actually jump in the car and drive down to the post office and collect our mail out of our post box. Now, I could have got someone else to do that for me, but what it did, it allowed me to do that compartmentalization that you were talking about. It allowed me to have a transition from being at work, then coming home again. So definitely can see how that would be stressful for people. So looking at it too from a behavior perspective, yeah, as we've said, it's more about how we think about things, how we see things, and those expectations. And it goes back to what Sandra's talking about when we're running those mind traps as well. If we've got a perfectionist strategy running or a perfectionist mind trap, then that's going to create a lot of stress as well. When I was talking about the performance trap and getting approval from others, all those things create a lot of stress as well. Fantastic. So what we might do, Sandhya, we might let you go first this time, so you get to say, and then Rushdina gets to add to it. So of the 26 competencies that the three of us, we train and coach in SEI, social and emotional intelligence, what are the ones that you think have the biggest impact on stress, as in being able to manage our stress? So if you give me your top two.
Okay, I'm happy that you said top two, because I don't think it is a single competency that can actually help with stress management. But my top take would definitely be emotional self-awareness, followed by emotional self-control. Because in stress management, we need to know, the first thing we need to know is what are our triggers. So if I know what is my trigger, then I know I'm about to get stressed, and I can, do my defense mechanism to help me better. So my first take is definitely emotional self-awareness, because from awareness comes an understanding of what are my stresses. And the second, of course, is emotional self-control, because once we know the triggers, we know how to manage, or probably at least influence it. So we don't get stressed easily, or we raise our threshold for stress.
Love that. Okay, fantastic. So Rushdina, do you want to throw another couple in there that come to mind for you?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, Sandhya. That was really, really nice. I would add to it personal power and resilience, because personal power gives us the awareness of our own power, our confidence level, our strengths to cope up with this stressful situation. So once we are developing self-awareness, we know about the emotions that are leading us towards stress. So that's when we need the personal power to develop our confidence that, yes, we can cope with this difficulty. We can cope with these challenges and this difficult situation and move on with it and reach our targets, achieve our goals. And then comes the resilience. It's with the meaning of life, we develop this resilience. We know what we want in life and how important that is. So I want to stay on track. So in order to be on track, I need to put up with the stress and move on. And then we have those tools working on them. I'm sure we're going to be, we are going to be allowed to discuss those tools afterwards. I'm not bringing in the tools now. But yes, my points are personal power and resilience.
Yeah, love that. As you both know, I always say that of the 26 competencies, personal power underpins all the others. That ability to know that you've got everything within you and around you to get ahead in life. It's not about power over others, it's power over yourself and building up your identity and self-worth. I love that. All right, so for me, because you took my top two, for me, a couple of others, there's two of them that come to mind straight away, and it's personal agility. The ability to be able to zig and zag, to be able to change direction without it being a major, problem. And when we're talking about personal agility, and we're not talking about flexibility from the point of view of being a gymnast, but if I use that as an example, if we're not open to change, and change is something that even saying the word change sometimes can invoke a state of anxiety for some people. If we're not open to new ideas and we're not able to shift quickly when we need to, and let me tell you, the world helps us to have that need right now. then it's like having a limb, say my hand here, not being used and becoming rigid because I'm resisting, and it becomes arthritic and it causes pain. That's a big one for me, is to become more personally agile and be able to make shifts. The second one is realistic optimism, that just came to me. I actually just let another one go, and I thought, no, realistic optimism is another one. So, I always use an image to demonstrate this, that I've found that it's got a picture of a glass that's half full at the bottom and the other one half full at the top. And, people say, are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person?
Yes.
And nowadays, a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't really matter because you can always fill the glass. But it's not, it's about having realistic optimism. It's not about that, optimism that just says, oh, I'm an eternal optimist. Everything's going to be okay. Because let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff going down right now around the world, right? And there is a level of uncertainty in it. But having a realistic optimism that puts things in perspective and allows you, as you build that competency, to go, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen here? What's the best thing that could happen here? And then reducing that overwhelm that causes that stress by bringing it down to, well, what's one thing that I could do to stop that worst case thing happening? And what's one thing I could do to work towards that best thing happening? And then to go, well, okay, what's likely to happen? So now that we've come out of that state of overwhelm, our brain will allow us to actually think more logically and go, well, okay, this is probably more middle of the road, what's going to happen? And then we're in a state to be able to go, okay, what's one thing, what's my next step that I do to move towards that outcome? So they're the two for me. And then obviously, right, it goes without saying, the competency of stress management itself. So learning strategies to reduce and manage stress. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about being able to manage the stresses that are in our world. So I love that. So between us, we came up with a handful of them. And by the way, I just sent these questions to Sandhya and Rushdina about an hour or so ago. It's great that we're all coming up with this. All right. So the next one, how can we use social and emotional intelligence to maintain healthy stress levels through this time of uncertainty? And I know we've talked about some of those already. So what I want you to do here, if you can, is just be a little bit more practical, all of us, to go, okay, so for example, you talked about Sandhya working from home, and Rushdina, you talked about, being in traffic and having expectations, for example. So if we pick up on those things, what are some practical things that I'm going to change the question. What are some practical things that you do to help you to manage stress? I know, Sandhya, that that story that you used as a metaphor there is your story. You're working at home, your husband's working at home, you've got the child at school at home, and you've got the baby, right? So tell us, what do you do that you've learnt through your studies and your application of emotional intelligence to help you to navigate that?
Yeah, so Grant, just like you've done, we have set up an office at home. And if we have a program, especially something like this, we come in and we close the door, and this is office. No one is allowed to disturb us here, whether it's a baby or the children for that matter. And one other thing that actually helps me compartmentalize is to make sure that I have some quality me time, which is earlier, if you were in the office, you could disconnect from this family, but now I'm seeing them too much, and I would like to have a little less of them sometimes. So one thing I can actually do is, because of everybody's sleep schedule, is I get up a little early. You would have noticed that. So I wake up a little early. And I know that everybody else is going to get up a little later than me. So I get a solid 2 hours for myself, where I actually sit down and do the things that I really want to do without being interrupted at all. And that could be maybe, practicing a 10 minutes of mindfulness, or reading my favorite book, or picking up a new hobby or something like that. So from this 5 o'clock to 7 a.m. in the morning, I have the house all to myself and nobody to trouble me at all. And that really helps me to compartmentalize. So my focus is on myself, and I change my concepts on myself in that 2 hours. I get a good grip of myself early in the morning, and then I go on to have my day with the children and my husband working from home or not having any help at home and all of that, and my own work schedule. And it works out very well. But that also makes sure that I get to go to sleep early. So it is working out fantastic so far.
Love that. And what I'm hearing in that is that, you know, everyone's got their own schedule, right? Because some people that be listening now, you know, won't have the same setup that we've got. You know, I'm a morning person as well, and I'm out on the road, and I've got a botanic garden right at my back door, and I go walking and I listen to podcasts and I meditate and I do all that sort of stuff. And yeah, everyone's still sound asleep in my house, but I have to get out of my house because I've got this beautiful little toy poodle who idolizes me, that she doesn't let me have any me time either. So yeah, so whatever it is, to make sure, I think the key point that I heard in that was me time. And to get me time, we need to first build our personal power so that we know that we are worthy of that me time. What would you say about that, Rushdina, before you give us some practical tips as well?
Yes, actually, Brian, it's so important having that me time. But this is how I see it. Even though there are people around me, I know it's my time. And even though there are noises, my daughter's making a lot of noise, trying to distract me, but she knows that when mom is doing some sketches, because that's more of the, you know, most of the times that's what I do during my me time. So she knows that I'm not allowed to make any noise. Even if I do make noise, it should not affect her. So I kind of close myself to all sorts of noise that happens outside my body. So that's something I ensure. So even if you have that poodle, I think it's possible to disconnect from the world around you. So I try the disconnection. I'm able to do that. And it feels heavenly when I do some sketches. So that's my passion. You know that I'm into art and painting. So that's one of my passions. So I love doing that sketch. And everyone in the house knows that I'm into sketching, which means I cannot be bothered. Even if they are talking to me, I hardly answer. I usually do not answer. I can't be that rude. I can really disconnect that way. So it really helps.
Fantastic. All right. So going beyond me time now, and thank you for that. What's another practical strategy that you utilize to keep your stress in a very stressful city that you live in, keep it in a manageable state?
Right. One thing that I do primarily is this positive self-talk. So it's kind of reframing the contents in my mind. So that helps me deal with the stresses that I'm about to face. I know I'm kind of prepared that there will be a lot of things that are unprecedented that I could not predict from beforehand. So I kind of prepare myself with this positive self-talk. And so if someone doesn't pick up my phone, I usually tell myself, okay, that person must have left his phone at home. And because he never memorized my number, which was not as important, so he can't call me back saying, just to inform me that he's left his home and we're due with the meeting, or the meeting is canceled, or whatsoever. So this is how I reframe the contents in my mind. That's the positive self-talk. That's one thing. So I usually use this positive self-talk method for a lot of things, for people's behavior, for the attitude they're projecting, they're demonstrating. If I see someone frowning, I tell myself it's not for me. That was not meant for me. And he must have had a bad day, or the previous hour must have been really, really hard on him. So this is how I tell myself. And the next thing that I do is exactly the questions that you have mentioned. So when things are right on my, when I'm about to face the stressful situation, when I know that, okay, I'm in the middle of a chaos, there's a mishap and I can't avoid it. I can't go past it. I have to walk through. So that's what I ask myself. The first thing was the worst thing that could happen out of this. So that helps me prepare. And what's the best thing that could happen? That gives me the assurance. And then I come back to the worst thing once again. And that's when I ask myself, so how do I handle it? What do I do and how do I handle it? So like we always say, the what and the how, it activates our neocortex, our prefrontal cortex. So I'm not going to go into all the neuroscience anymore, but let's just be practical in our tools in a discussion. But it helps us into logical thinking. So we all know that, but even then, it really, really helps me in a very stressful situations. Even when nothing is working around me all right, nothing is working around me as planned. So that's actually, if I talk about my personal experience during the last 8 months of this pandemic, there was one thing I did that has actually brought in this paradigm shift of my physically attending trainings to online trainings. So that's how I prepared myself. And I'm not bragging, but I need to put this up as an example for the learners online today, that I've used emotional intelligence to bring in this positive transformation in our practices, in my operation and the work I do, and to connect with people, to stay on with the training, to help people in their learning. So these are the resilience, these questions that helps me build up my resilience in stress. And it gives me a lot of courage, a lot of strength, and of course, the personal power. Personal power is always up.
Love it. Fantastic. Wow, this is an awesome conversation. And I'm sure, people are loving the reframes, and that's the thing. What's coming to me is, as you were saying that, is, we can choose the dialogue. We can write the script of what we allow to go in.
Yes.
And I love how you were saying there that even though we don't know it's true, like, seriously, like people from the outside are going, no, that guy had his phone with him. He didn't leave it at home. But if we choose to believe that it's not about us, it's not personally about us, then it's a total different dialogue that goes on. And as you know, I like to call our inner dialogue our mini me. It's that small voice that's trying to keep us safe, and it's like a 2-year-old child.
Brent, can I just add one more line to that discussion?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry to cut you.
Yeah, just let me finish. So it's, so it's like a 2-year-old child. If we don't give it the attention that it needs, it'll get our attention, right?
Yes.
So, acknowledge it and go, no, hang on, we're choosing to believe this. So I love that. So, yes, Rushdina.
Yes, just to add to what you just said. So even if I see that someone's frowning and I keep telling myself the frown is not for me, often I'm asked that, what if the frown is for me? So the students often ask me, the learners often ask me, so what if the frown is for me? What if he is frowning at me and he means it for me? So my answer is, if he means it for me, he has to say it. It has to come out of him. And if he really brings it out, if he says it out, I have my answer because I have prepared myself for the worst. So how did I prepare myself for the worst? Because that's the first question I ever asked myself, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? Thank you.
Love it. That's excellent. Love that. All right. So anything else? Anything else, Sandhya, that you're doing that you're using emotional intelligence, you're using positive psychology, anything we're talking about to manage your stress in yourself or with your clients right now?
Yeah. So I also try positive psychology or positive mental talk. And I find that a lot of clients in the very beginning find this a little difficult to actually practice through, because we're talking about positive psychology throughout. So another technique that I use, and in fact, it is one of my favorite techniques, is the deep center breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. So you do your abdominal breathing, just to 10 counts. You take a deep breath, hold your breath, and breathe out. That's it. That's the technique. So you breathe a deep breath using your abdomen. You feel your abdomen coming in and out. Even if you are a pectoral breather, you have to make sure that for the deep center breathing or the abdominal breathing, you use your abdomen and you just do 10 counts of it. So this is something that would hardly take a couple of minutes. But as soon as you complete it, you can even try it right now and see it. As soon as you complete it, you feel very light. The reason is the stress hormone, the cortisol, actually goes out of your body, because cortisol disintegrates as carbon dioxide. And so you're pushing it out of your body. So that makes sure that your stress levels actually come down. So what I tell my clients, and I also practice, is that few times a day, something like 5 times a day or 6 times a day, I anyway do abdominal breathing, whether I'm stressed or not. So when I space it out really like that, I can actually make sure that the factors that is causing me stress, whether I'm aware of it or not, I am able to keep my cortisol levels less. So my ability to withstand stress actually becomes better. So this is a technique that I love the most, and I keep telling people, and people have also told me that they do some small techniques to remind themselves to keep it spaced out 5 times or 6 times. So every time you sit down, on a chair, after you've come back to work or for any reason you sit down, you just remember to do the deep center breathing, because on a typical work day, a person actually comes back to his seat 5 to 8 times. This is what we have found out, and research also says. So this is my favorite technique, along with, of course, positive mental talk.
Yeah, love that. And it's all about, for me, just making sure that I control the emotional anxieties and the why is this happening, and all the things that we can get into that story and the dialogue, and bring it back up into my prefrontal cortex, bring it back up into the logical brain. And practically how I love to do that is make sure that I ask myself logical questions. I ask myself what questions rather than why. So I ask, why is this happening? Why did he do that? Why did she say that? It's going to invoke emotion in me, as opposed to going, what was said. And the other thing for me is that I work a lot with people I see is they always make up stories for themselves. So they do the other person's part as well. So they decide, for example, if we use the example of the frown, they decide that the person is frowning at them. And so they already make that decision, and they make the decision then as to why. They must be upset with me, or whatever it is. So one of the big ones for me that I now do is, if I do have any doubts and uncertainties, I ask questions. And if that was let's not go into the content too much, but if I felt someone was frowning at me and they kept doing it, it wasn't just a fleeting glance, I'd go over and go, hey, can I just have a chat with you for a sec? It's probably me, not you, but are you upset with me about something right now? And get it out in the open, because that unknown, let go crazy in here will come up with its own dialogue and its own story, and we'll start catastrophizing, and we'll start making up the end result, and we'll decide, oh yeah, that must be why he's upset with me, or whatever it is. And then when we do have that next interaction with that person, we're ready with that evidence to duke it out with them and to get into conflict. So for me, yeah, it's being able to, make the unknown known by asking questions. I love that. All right. So do we have a practical tip or exercise in us, each of us? We've got a few minutes left. That and Sandhya, you've just done one. You might even want to take us through that. Or you might have another one. But what's a practical tip? I taught one yesterday about, being able to go through the process of, being able to work out what our emotion is, and then do an audit on our thoughts and decide on the outcome, and then to control the sabotage, and then decide on the strategy. So you can go back and you listen to that one tomorrow. But do you have something like that, Rushdina, that you can take us through?
Right. I'll talk about 2, which I often practice almost every day. One is the exercise. So that's the muscle contraction and loosening. So it's called PMR in short, progressive muscle relaxation. So you can try it with your hand muscle, with your lower arms, upper arms, jaw muscle, abdominal muscle, or feet, or your calves or your thigh. So you contract the muscles, hold it for 10 seconds and let it loose, stay for 20 seconds, and again, contract it for another 10 seconds. So this you can repeat 3 to 4 times. You can do this twice a day. So it really, really helps. It gets the oxygen circulated well, and you feel a lot fresher than before. So that's one thing I do. Another thing which I personally felt very useful in terms of exercises, when I rub these temples, these areas, at the joint of my ears and at the back of my ears, really, really helps. And the head lining, the border of my head. So that really, really makes me feel good. And, it's very refreshing. So that's one thing. Those are the two exercising techniques I usually practice. And in addition to that, one thing I do is just like Sandhya does her meditation, the breathing technique, the diaphragmatic breathing, I do that and I lead myself to disconnect to some other scene. So I've actually learned it from the logotherapy Dr. Viktor Frankl had mentioned in his book. So it's like disconnecting from the present and going into somewhere, connecting yourself to somewhere, to a place or to a situation that you really cherished, you loved being at. So it could be a place you visited in your childhood, or it could be a holiday destination you visited last year, or you dream of visiting. So there are so many video tutorials in the YouTube giving out the background music, the forest, green, waterfall background, raindrop musics and all. Those video tutorials help to bring in a background sound for you. As you're closing your eyes, you can feel yourself that you're physically there. So you try to connect with your vision by closing your eyes. Of course, you try to see what you want to see, and you try to smell. If you're standing in the grass, if you're imagining you're standing in the grass, you need to try to smell. Imagine the smell of your grass, and then the feel on the sensation on your skin. So these are the feelings you need to connect with. So this particular technique helps me a lot, and I feel that it's this dopamine rush getting back. I feel energized, and especially when you're stuck at home for such a long time, you can't get anywhere, you can't go anywhere, no holiday is possible. It's really, really helpful.
Love that. Yeah, one of the things I've been telling people all along since this pandemic started is that, it's not what we do that's changed, it's just how we're doing it. So I just heard you go on a holiday on YouTube, so it's getting those same things that we want,
Yes.
getting them different
Yes.
ways. I love that.
Yes.
All right. So for me, I love to get into nature, I love to get into nature. I love, and I'm blessed. I live, as I said, on the largest botanic gardens, I should say, in the Southern Hemisphere. Is literally just there. It's just in my backyard. And so I go walking in that, and to get into nature and to see, huge trees and lots of animals, like I've got kangaroos and, little rabbits running around and whatever. Just to get into nature is something that really, really helps me. All right. So what about you? What about you? Thank you. What about you, Sandhya? You can finish us off with something that you do.
Yeah, and so of course the breathing and self-talk, and there is another technique that I really find it very useful, especially these days, and it's a grounding technique. So it's like this: you just when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling very disturbed, frustrated, any emotion that you don't really like to experience at that point, you remember to look at 5 things. So 5 different things. So you look at 5 different things and take in the color and how does it look. And then you touch 4 different things. So all 4 of it has different textures. So you just experience the 4 different textures. So sometimes in front of you in the office, it's a paper, it's a pen, your phone and laptop. And then you listen to 3 voices. So you can, somebody speaking probably and something in the background, maybe it's a wind or the traffic or something like that. So you listen to 3 different voices, and then you try to smell 2 different smells. So sometimes it is there, sometimes you can just remember the memory of a nice smell, and one thing that tastes. So we just, if you have just had coffee, then yes, you could feel that, or something. If you had a candy or something, you could actually feel that. But if not, just try to memorize that, re-memorize that particular, taste that you actually like. So you do these 5 things: 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and that helps you to ground yourself. And you take a grip on your frustration or anxiety that you're actually feeling. So this is one technique that I find it very useful, especially when I'm anxious or frustrated.
Love that. And people, may not know, I'm not going to, once again, as we said, we're not going to go deep into the neuroscience around emotional intelligence and whatever in this session. However, you know, all our sensory data comes into our brain via the thalamus, which is in the limbic system, in the emotional brain, except the smell. The olfactory system does not come in through that channel. So it's so powerful, and it's one that, you know, people don't often use. And I love when I'm coaching someone and I'm taking them back to a time when they felt empowered. I always ask them, you know, notice the smells that you were smelling. And it's such a powerful thing, which is another reason, and my exercise is a grounding one as well. That's another reason to get outside, to get out in nature. And I know you've got to do that within the constraints of what your different rules and regulations are right now. But even with your own home, we can do these practical tips and etc. You know, one of the things right now, and I'm going to say it again, I'm not lessening the challenges that people have, and they're all different around the world right now. Even looking at things differently and going, I get to stay inside as opposed to I'm not allowed to go outside. So reframe, the power of reframe, and then be able to go, okay, it's not that I can't do this because I can't go outside. What can I smell, touch, feel, taste, you know, look at inside my home? So putting ourselves and saying our environment is conducive to what it is we want to do rather than the other way around. Hey, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate the fact that, you know, and I look at the fact that it's over 2 years ago that we started working together, and to have all three of us together and have this conversation is doing wonders for my heart. So I really appreciate it. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm just going to check. People have been putting things in. There's no actual questions in there. But just before we go to the break, I wanted to say thank you. You are a blessing to me. You are a blessing to people builders and to the people that you work with. So keep doing it. Keep changing lives. And I appreciate both of you very, very much.
Thank you, Grant, for being an awesome mentor.
No problems. All righty. So I'm going to let you ladies go now, and you can jump out and go and watch the stream. But for the rest of us, we are going to take a 5-minute stretch break. You might even want to do a couple of those things that the ladies talked about, and then we're going to come back and we're going to land this summit with an amazing speaker from the UK. I'll see you in 5.